And in 1995, I was in a psychiatric institution with major anxiety disorder, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. So welcome to the conference. I'm so happy you're here.
And so I don't mean to be flip, I really don't, but it's my story and I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed. It's why I'm here with you today.
I am Tami West, and that is my story. Welcome to Consider Yourself Hugged, a place to find comfort and support as you navigate your mental and emotional well-being. So sit back and relax, unless you're driving, and get ready for this week's hug. Welcome back, fellow huggers. And actually, welcome to week 3 of Mental Health Awareness Month. I just want you to see, if you're on YouTube, that I am drinking my coffee out of one of my old Consider Yourself Hugged mugs, which makes me realize how long I've been doing this, like several years. The logo has changed, and actually I sold the mugs for a while, but they break. I don't know if any of you have ever bought like bulk mugs, but it just wasn't worth it, and they cost too much to ship. And this has nothing to do with anything. But this week's theme, and go back to last week. It was last week when I shared the National Council for Mental Wellbeing's like toolkit for Mental Health Awareness Month. So what I'm going to talk about today with week 3's theme is in that. But before I read it, like I've actually started recording this twice because for some reason my mind is just like going a million different directions about how I want to talk about this. And I don't really know why, because it's mental health, but there was just something happened that kind of bugged me a little bit. And so I wanted to share that with you. And I thought, okay, well, I'll share it in the beginning. And I was like, no, I'll share it in the middle, but I'm just going to share it. So yesterday, my husband and I were driving somewhere. I think we were coming through downtown in Nashville. And I took a picture of this. We saw a billboard, and I saw the letters OCD, and I immediately assumed that it was going to be something about Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's for a new coffee shop called Obsessive Coffee Disorder. And then the tagline is Get Obsessed. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of see it right now. I'm just holding it up on my camera. Actually, I didn't take a picture of it. I Googled, because we were, driving 70 miles an hour down the interstate, or he was driving. But I Googled it. I was like, what is that? Did that say OCD? Did that say coffee disorder? So I Googled it, and it's a coffee shop. Okay. So here's the thing is, if you've heard me share my story about mental health and psychiatric hospital stay, I'm super open about it. Some people have even called me flip about it. If you've listened to me regularly, you know that on this date, so I'm recording on Monday, May 13th for the Wednesday episode, I am currently weaning off antidepressants for my anxiety that I started during the pandemic. So, I'm good to talk about it. I'm good to talk about my diagnosis. Years past, it was generalized anxiety, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. Currently, when I have been back for diagnosis, it's generalized anxiety disorder. And so I'm so open and free to talk about it, and I don't get offended. And that's why talking about this today, maybe that's why it's so hard for me, because we live in this world where I see two sides. I see people who are getting offended, and then I see the opposite side of people saying, why is everybody getting offended? And because I teach so much about mental health, I preface a lot of things by saying, look, I say, I'm going to talk about language today, and language that can decrease people's pain, language that can decrease pain for them, for people, for their family members. When people hear others talking about mental health issues in a flip way, and maybe it's hurtful to them because their family is suffering. And so I don't and I'm not offended by this obsessive coffee disorder, but I am kind of like, ugh. I guess that's the word. We are talking this week about celebrating celebrate mental well-being. So I am going to come back to that. But as I saw this obsessive coffee disorder, I'm sure their coffee is probably really great. And so I've never been there. I don't know anything about them. I just saw it. And when I speak about mental health, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. My PhD is in human development. I don't treat people. I have no training in specifically talking to you about, for example, obsessive compulsive disorder. I started to say I don't have experience in it, but this was another thing I wanted to share with you. And I'm sorry if I'm all over the place. I say that every week, don't I? I feel like I probably have an undiagnosed mild obsessive compulsive disorder. Let me say the words again: obsessive compulsive disorder. So there's the obsession, okay, something that your mind focuses on. So for me, if my husband listens to this, here's how I'll know how I'll know if he ever listens to this, because we've talked about this before. I tend to have an obsession with time, the clock, numbers. Okay, the compulsion is to watch the clock, watch the clock, watch the clock. So, for example, if I tell you I'm going to meet you at 12 o'clock, I will be watching the clock from the time I leave to the time I get there. If it fluctuates, 12:01, and then 11:59 and 12:01, and it makes me very anxious the whole time until I get there. So that's the compulsion. And then the disorder part, there are specific criteria if it affects your life for X number. And so that's why I say I don't need to have a diagnosis. I know that it happens. And I try to work on ways to do mindfulness and meditation and calming. But a disorder can affect someone's life and cause them a great deal of pain. And so it bums me out to see anything flippantly named after it. I don't know. Again, not offended for me because I'm so far along in my mental health journey and all the things. But what about somebody who's suffering, who's not far along in their mental health journey? I don't know. We tend to equate things like OCD and perfectionism and being a workaholic with being productive and passionate about your work and being getting things done and being responsible. And that's not true. Like, I don't want us to identify ourselves as perfectionists or workaholics or OCD or any of that stuff, because those things mean something very specific. So if you're wondering, okay, how are you getting to celebrating with talking about this? So let me go back. All right. So I'm going to be going back and forth. Let me read to you what the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, how they describe celebrating it, and then 4 tips. But then I have a few tips of my own because I wanted to go a little bit deeper. So here's their description of celebrating, and also they call it celebrate mental well-being. Okay, I'm going to say this again in a minute, but we're not talking about mental illness, which is part of all of this. I'm going to come back to that, but we're talking about well-being. So they describe it this way: by communicating how important mental well-being is to you, you can help raise awareness about mental health and inspire change. This month and year-round, wear your badge of honor for mental health advocacy. Showcase if you are a mental health first aider or you have any training in that. The National Council for Mental Wellbeing sponsors mental health first aid, which is a course that I teach. So if you have that, showcase your certification, participate in a National Council partner activity, and more. And then it has 4 ways to get started. You have this document. I'll refer you back to where it is in the last session, because I don't want to post it again. It's already there. But here are the 4 things. Number 1, download our suite of graphics and post them to your social media channels to bring attention to mental well-being. Oh, I try to do good when it comes to social media, and I go through, I don't know about you, but I go through like, oh, I do great, 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 and then not so great, 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 and then great, 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 and then not so great. Right now I'm in a not so great. But I'm gonna look at that after I finish recording. Number 2, support mental well-being across the country by taking part in MTV's Mental Health Awareness Month campaign on May 16th. I clicked on it, but that was like 10 minutes ago. I've already forgotten. So take a look at that. Number 3, celebrate this month's significance with the Mental Health Coalition, a national community of organizations that's creating positive change. These are all good things to look at regardless of, how you feel about mental health, mental well-being, which that's why I want to go a little bit deeper here in a minute. But these are great things for you to look at. Lots of resources here. And number 4, reshare the National Council's social media activity throughout the month. So get on social media, and where the National Council has shared things, share that as well. And reach out to check in with your family, friends, and networks. Look for opportunities to showcase your mental well-being pride. And I thought these were all great. I really, really did. My question was, what does it really mean to celebrate mental well-being? Because like last week was lead by example. Last week was do self-care activities and share that you do those things so that you can be like an advocate. So I felt like that was kind of similar. And then I thought, well, how many of my listeners out there are going to want to like actively participate in the mental health advocacy? How many of you out there are going to share things on social media? And I don't know. And just because you don't doesn't mean that you don't care. You might be like me. And honestly, I get busy, but also, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I just forget to post. It's just, I don't know. I want to do better. I'll be 60 in a few months. I think I'm just making this up, but it's not quite as easy for those of us that didn't grow up in the social media era, because it wasn't a part of our lives until we were well into our 40s, maybe. And so I don't know, it's not ingrained. So here's what I did. I thought of 4 things. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I was like, well, what does it mean to celebrate? Are people going to celebrate? And these are pretty simple, but they are deeper. So here's what I put, and I'll put it in the show notes. Number 1, decide if you want to actively participate in creating positive awareness for mental health. I'm a big old advocate of choice, deciding, choosing. You don't have to. No one has to like actively participate in moving the mental health conversation forward and showing off, being proud of your stance on mental health affecting all of us and all that things. You don't have to, but decide. That was number 1. Number 2, if no, that's okay. But then I added this, but maybe don't actively create negative awareness. Okay, so you're listening or watching my podcast, so I'm assuming you care about mental and emotional well-being. That's the subtitle. It's Consider Yourself Hugged, Mental and Emotional Well-being. That's what it's about every single week, or some aspect of it. So if you don't want to participate in actively promoting mental well-being and mental health awareness, that's okay. Just try not to put a negative spin on it. Number 3, if yes, what does that look like to you? So what does it look like to you to actively participate? And it could be, let me go back to the National Council's document. It could be resharing those graphics, taking part in the MTV campaign, whatever that is, doing something with the Mental Health Coalition, resharing the National Council's social media, reaching out to family and friends, looking for opportunities. It could be that. And then I wrote a few other things that it might look like to you. Does it look like sharing your story, whether that's privately or with whoever, or publicly in a group? The second one of what does it look like to you? Does it look like being an advocate for someone else? So speaking up to help that person, maybe helping them get connected, maybe becoming a mental health first aider, which really is being an advocate or helping people. The next one I put, does it look like actively promoting, which would be actually what I just said for the National Council, those suggestions. And then the last one I put for what does it look like to you if you do want to actively participate, does it look like just speaking against stigma? I think I've shared a story before of when I was in a group of people and the topic of mental health came up and someone said, they were talking about someone in their world and they said they just want attention and they just use it as an excuse. And I was like, ugh. And I spoke up in a calm, polite, non-threatening way. But that's what I mean. So what does actively participating look like to you? And the 4 that I put were sharing your story, being an advocate, actively promoting, or maybe just speaking against stigma. There are others, I'm sure. Those are the ones that came to me. So on social media, when I post this in the show notes, in an email, a text, let me know what it looks like to you. And number 4, this is where I said I would come back to this. And this is how we're going to end our time together. Remember that mental health and remember that mental health and well-being are not the same thing as mental illness. Some of us have battled mental illness, but all of us have battled mental well-being and mental health from time to time. So that's why when we say, well, maybe the mental health doesn't affect you, but it does. It affects all of us. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And so although, somebody asked me on a webinar last week, actually, she didn't ask me. She made the comment that she thought the word mental illness should not be used anymore. And I politely kind of just disagreed, not in a mean way, just because we have physical illness and some of us might have mental illness. And so it's okay to say that. It's just the stigma that is put on it that is destructive to people. So even though you or your family or friends may not have battled mental illness per se, we've all battled our mental health, our mental well-being. And so that's why this conversation could be important to you, should be important to you in at least some way. So let me read the 4 again. Decide if you want to actively participate in creating positive awareness for mental health. Number 2, if no, that's okay, but let's not go the negative route. Number 3, if yes, what does it look like to you? And number 4, remember that mental health and well-being is not the same thing as mental illness. Some of us have battled mental illness, but all of us have battled mental health and well-being from time to time. Thank you for being with me for part 3. As always, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, download, rate, review, invite your friends to our community. Please follow me on my professional Facebook page. That's where I do most of my social media, although it's not a lot. And then also, if you're a woman, follow me, join my private Facebook group. All of that information is in the show notes. Thank you. I hope your mental well-being soars, and I hope that you will figure out what all of this means to you. And until we're together next time, consider yourself hugged.